SOT West, coming at you from NTC, Off the Radar.
This is Off the Radar. I'm Captain Weston Rich, an observer coach trainer for the Green Berets at the National Training Center. This is part 2 of our discussion with Major Michael Hitzner. We ended last episode discussing mission command at the Special Forces company level. If you haven't listened to it, please go back and listen to that episode. And now we will pick back up with discussing Special Forces teams and companies training for large-scale conflict operations. Well, do you think SF companies and teams get value from coming here to train large-scale conflict? Is that going to give them training value for a competition event that they might go do in the near term?
Yes, I believe so. And this is why I started with my training experience of just doing the basics. The missions we went and did were competition-based. The training we did was combat, was combat-based. Knowing all of our weapon systems, all of our AT weapons, how to do call for fires. We trained just combat basics. And then we had to go down range and recruit Syrians to go fight for their something completely different. Because I would argue that all those higher end competition skills are more built around just interpersonal skills, being a good partner, training your partner and being there and being present and being someone like, oh, we want to work with these guys. And these guys give us better training than the Russians do. We've experienced that in Egypt in 5th group, where our guys went down range and jumped with the Egyptians free fall. The only people they had ever jumped with before that was Russians. And we showed them that we're better, right? So competition is super important, but how much do you necessarily need to train to do that? I would argue that most SF teams and guys can pretty much do that at the drop of a hat. But what we see when they come out here is how to do just the fundamentals of surviving in the 3 ways that I previously described out there. Is like our field craft is lacking. How often do teams go out in the back 40 at home station for more than 72 hours? How many even go out for 72 hours by themselves and train?
Probably not many.
And then all of a sudden,
wait till they do a TDY somewhere to do something like that.
Right. And then all of a sudden we bring you out here and we put you in the middle of the desert for 8 to 10 days. And you're staying out there. Yep. You can come back, but it's going to be...
It's painful. If you want to try to ARPL and get back to safe-ish lands or meet up with your company.
Right.
There's pain to that.
Right. And we see that it takes about, I think on a, rotation, and I've done 12 of these now. So I've got some pretty good context and pretty good sample size. Is it takes about half of the rotation, no matter how much we brief it ahead of time, that this is different. It takes about half of the rotation for the AOB and the ODAs to really, really grasp what LSCO is. Yeah. And then we see that over the last half of the rotation, we're like, okay, the light bulb turns on, the mindset shift into what we're trying to accomplish here and what the dangers are in LSCO and what our role is in LSCO and how they should be projecting forward. At the AOB level, they have their initial plan. No plan survives first contact, especially in LSCO. Or maybe the initial plan is good, but it's only good so far out. And that AOB in LSCO has to be projecting 72 hours forward. Yeah. If you're trying to do it on the day of, it's too late. And it's just not going to happen. And we usually don't see that until about halfway through the rotation. So what I think is at home station, if you're training for your competition job, you're a little bit behind the power curve when you come out for LSCO. If you start with that fundamental basic, train your SOPs, train your combat skills first. We're not asking you to go out and do a whole collective training exercise ahead of time, but if the guys understand the basics of your worst day in combat and how to do that and how to maintain that over a period of time that you don't know how long it's going to be, you're set up. That's the mindset switch. Yeah. I don't know how often we train that at home, because it's not about just getting out into the deep and gaining access into the deep. It's staying out there and maintaining those operations, staying alive and long enough to actually produce effects over time. Because it was hard enough to get one team in, probably in initial stages. Are we even going to be able to replace that team if, worst case scenario happens? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. For a combat training center or NTC specific, since that's where we're at, we kind of touched on this, but in your opinion, should this be looked at as a certification or validation event as a pre-mission training typically is, or should it be viewed as a completely different event that you're here to train on what the USASOC commander wants you to train on when you're at a combat training center?
So NTC and our SOF at NTC and at any CTC, JRTC the same way. The scenario is largely designed based off of USASOC CTC training guidance, and that training guidance is centered around large-scale combat operations and multi-domain operations. So that is like at a fundamental, the base what our charge is. It is really to prepare SF, CA, and PSYOPs to execute their missions in a large-scale combat operation environment, a high-scale conflict, major army against major army, and train our role within that. But that's not to say that it's just we're not going to hit any of your medals. We're not going to hit any of your training objectives. That may help you within your as an evaluation or a certification exercise or even a PMT. I would say it's not a PMT, but what we do is we don't get a mission letter, but we ask the companies, hey, what are your medal? What's your medal? What are your training objectives? What are some specific things that you want to get out of there? And then what we do is we bake those in to that large scale training,
and
that large scale combat
the company
operation.
give you that?
We start at about D-270.
Oh wow.
Really D-180 is where we kind of really get into it, and around that D-80, 160 is when the AOB leadership and as many guys as they want to bring out come to the leadership training program here, and that's their first introduction to LSCO and what we're trying to do here at NTC. And then we as a leadership sit down with the leadership and walk them through the expectations of what you're going to experience when you come to NTC, and then how you can start preparing for that. And then it's on the AOB to really how sincere do they take that guidance and put it into practice. Because what I will say is it's very obvious who prepared for NTC when they get here and who kind of just showed up. And that's a fundamental thing too.
Yeah.
At a fundamental level, just preparedness and being a professional. If you take it like a combat deployment and you prepare like it's a combat deployment, you'll be ready and you'll be successful. If you take it as just another training event, and if you take it for, I don't want to go to NTC, it will be painful. But not for reasons not rooted in trying to train the unit for as best as we can. What we don't want to do is have people come out of here with training scars and take away bad lessons learned from when they came down here. So what AOB-West's contract with the teams is we're going to train you as hard as possible the entire time. And it's on you to play into that, to be prepared to come into it and take the training for what it's worth, to prepare you to go downrange and execute, to show you your flaws so you can fix those gaps and seams, make the mistakes here. We encourage people that we as AOB-West and the trainers are not evaluators. We don't have a checklist. There's no set of gates and metrics that you have to meet. It is purely to put you in a large-scale combat environment and have you learn. I would argue that we teach more than we observe and control within our job here. So we kind of take the weight off of people's shoulders that we are not evaluating you. Because sometimes when people think they're being evaluated, they want to be perfect. They don't want to make mistakes because they think it's going to affect their team. They're not going to get their mission. And they're going to look be looked downly upon.
Yeah.
So we're very deliberate in putting that out front, that we're not evaluating you. This is a place to learn. This is a place to try new things. This is a place to test your SOPs. And this is and make mistakes. And it's okay to fail based off of like things you're trying. There's a difference between failing because you're just trying new things and the enemy gets a vote and hey, that didn't work, but we'll change it. There's a difference between that and just coming out here and kicking the tires and failing. That's very different. But can it be used as an evaluation or a PMT? Absolutely. Where that onus falls is on the actual executing unit. What we would ask there is that unit sends out their external evaluators, that they can, if they want to have their checklist or whatever, they can do that. And I would argue that you're going to find no better collective training exercise to really get a holistic look at your AOB and your ODAs. Because it's as live as you can. It's not canned. Your battalion didn't build the scenario. No one knows what's about to happen.
You don't get G2.
You don't get G2.
From the battalion warrant or
so it's how do people actually react to things that they don't know are coming? It is sometimes PMTs can feel like I'm in a sticks lane, right? That's not the case at NTC. It's as fluid and as dynamic and as free flowing as we could possibly make it, especially for our SF rotations. There are rails on either side, but I would say is there's not a route you have to go to achieve success as much as you have a axis of advance that is the entire training area.
Yeah.
And it's on you to figure out how you can get there. And it gets really hard for us on the backside because we war game what we think you're going to do. But oftentimes you zig when you think you're going to zag, but it might make sense. So we have to figure out how to facilitate that for you because we want you to look at your operational environment, understand your operational environment, piece together everything that we're flooding into the operational environment, and then have the effects on that operational environment in accordance with the Suggestive Commander's intent that you've been given.
And those effects actually drive the battle space. I mean, there is a loose, you'd said like rails, a loose script or whatever you want to call it to the overall exercise, but the units of action will actually impact how the battle space is. And then on the backside, you have the OCs and everybody's changing things on the daily just because, hey, this team did this, they zigged instead of zagged, or the AOB made this decision when we thought they were going to make a different decision. So now we're trying to do backside support so that it's a seamless and it doesn't feel like anything happened for the training unit. They're just in the scenario and they're going through it as if it's a real war. It's a real country that they're in and they're doing real combat. So we try to make it as realistic as possible.
Right. And then within that, if you're the battalion commander that wants to use this as an ex-eval for your company, well, I'd make that be the group commander for the company, but for your ODAs, all those tasks that you would be evaluating in an ex-eval, they're going to do them.
Yep.
It's just the scenario just is within the scenario. Naturally, you have to do all those skills to accomplish your mission. So it's kind of weird. The scenario isn't purpose built to hit certain METs. It is designed to facilitate the execution of all those METs. So yes, the one drawback thing that I guess commanders would have to realize is that I think PMTs and ex-evals turn into kind of sticks lanes because they want to put each ODA through the exact same lane so that they can evaluate across a certain standard. And I see how that makes sense. The trade-off here is not every ODA is going to have the exact same experience. They're going to do different things, but what I would argue is they're all going to hit the same METs to a certain extent, just at different places and times and in different contextual situations or different operations, but they're all going to come out.
Yeah.
From a PMT standpoint, the argument I would make that you can use it as your PMT goes right back to my fundamentals argument. Is if at any level what we try to do all these higher technical things here within MDO. And that's important for our guys to understand how to employ space capabilities, how to employ cyber capabilities, utilize your Brighton grads, utilize the 17 series that you may bring out, utilize your SODAs. I'm going to harp on this for a little bit I think a lot of times, I think our guys don't necessarily realize the value that a SOD-A can have in LSCO from multiple perspectives, from a defensive perspective and a protection perspective, but also from an offensive perspective on how to utilize all that out there. But you're not even going to get to utilize it if you're not sound in the basics, because you just won't get there. Yeah. And then, similar to my experience, all I ODA trained on was our SOP book, and we went down range and did missions that weren't necessarily aligned with that. We went to PMTs and were highly successful. I'll use a vignette, so it's just not from so you're not just talking about from Major Hitzner's view, which is quite biased because I live and work here, and I believe over the last 2 years, I had never been to NTC in my life. I've been to JRTC once as a conventional Army. I'd never been to a CTC with SOF.
Okay.
I have become a believer in this place and what we can do here to train our SOF for our SOF. So to bring it from another perspective and not just mine, in the fall of 23, rotation 2402, we had 5th group out here, and they were going out to be AOB Syria eventually. And this essentially was their PMT. Their battalion had 2 companies deploying, and Wismer down at SOFTech really could only facilitate 1 company. So they split the companies. They put one down there and did a SOFTech traditional SF PMT built around their deployment.
Yep.
And then the other company came here and adapted into and executed our LSCO training scenario that is built around CT USASOC guidance, not tied to any one mission set. And then, of course, we baked in their METs. We did sensitive activities with it. We had Jedburgh teams. We had 2 CA teams with them, and they had PSYOP teams with them. That AOB commander, about a month or so later, and his Sergeant Major were up on Capitol Hill briefing Congress about their preparedness and their role to go out to AOB Syria. And they pointed back to what we did here at NTC, where the AOB commander this was a mission command crucible. Take away the scenario and the targets and the operations they did, but just for an AOB command for how to do mission command in a high scale combat operation, he's like, I couldn't ask anything better, because it was intense, it was complex, it was dynamic, and it was fluid and free flowing. It wasn't canned. We give very few orders. We give basically 1 to get you in the box, 1 to get you out of the box, and maybe 1 to 2 in the middle for like the most important objectives that you need time to plan for. Other than that, it's free flowing and take the environment for what it is and what we put into it. So from a PMT perspective, it's just those basic things of mission command and basic fundamentals. Because I would argue you can adapt that to any environment that you come in. And then when you're in that environment, if that environment now changes to worst case scenario, large scale combat or high intensity conflict, you're prepared for it and you can switch.
Yeah.
Like that. I would argue it's easier to train for high intensity conflict and execute competition than it is to train for competition and then have to execute high intensity conflict.
All right. So over your 12 rotations that you've observed, and you have at least
it's been that long.
At least 2 more.
I've been here too long.
Before you PCS. What's the biggest thing you learned? What's the thing you're going to take away and try to implement in the rest of your Army career?
So I feel like we've talked about a lot of this, but when we come out to the biggest thing, I think it's being well-rounded, and AOBs and ODAs, and I think this goes back to training guidance, is the training guidance we're giving our teams, and their understanding. I think what it comes out is it's understanding of the differences between competition and LSCO or large scale war, and how we integrate into that, because we're going to be in the same battle space as divisions and corps, and what our role is in that. I think what I found is the guys know, and the teams know, and the doers know, how to employ the effect, but I don't know if they necessarily know why, or the larger impact of what they're doing. When we say execute this task, do they understand that it's in a convergence window for a division or corps level operation? And that division and corps level is largely depending on soft access and placement to deliver those precision MDO effects. So like a theater level operation tied to convergence window with a lot of other assets, one SF ODA in the deep can make it or break it. And I don't know if we have that level of understanding. That's what we're trying to show them when we come here.
I think that, at least from my perspective, teams they leave with a better understanding than they arrive of the effects that they can have and at scale.
Right. And the same thing with the AOB. So it's training for both. Yes, we have to train for competition. We do that on a daily basis. But I can walk out of this room and some group's phone might be ringing because a catastrophic event happened, and all of a sudden that group's got to go to war. Like what happened to Fifth Group in 2001.
Yep. Right.
And that's the things that I think about is, are we prepared to do that? And are there teams that have been training the right mixture of things? And do they understand the why? Because we find guys like, hey, get the remote access device close in, and they do that great. But do they understand the bigger context of why they're doing it and the importance of it, and how deliberate they have to be in doing that within a certain window, and why?
With that, we'll wrap this up. Appreciate your time, sir. You talked a lot about knowing the basics, having that standard operating procedure, which Master Sergeant Connor and I discussed on the last time we did this, and would love to see teams and companies come out with a written SOP book and share that with the ODAs, or excuse me, with this OCs, so that we can have a better idea of what you guys are planning to execute as your standard operating procedures. I'd like
to make one more comment.
Yeah, go for it.
On that is, the most successful AOBs and ODAs we see come out here are ones that treat it exactly like a deployment and as absolute real, because we will on the backside. I promise you that. And two, they have thought about these things. At least they have an SOP book. They've run through their SOPs. They have a baseline understanding of how they operate. The key thing is, the key difference between, I've seen AOBs and ODAs that come out here with that, and I've seen two things happen, is they get married to it and they're going to force it, right? Or they're going to take it. Your SOP is almost like doctrine. It's an outline.
Yeah.
But you have to adapt to it. And if things aren't working, that's the beauty of NTC. It'll show you where maybe something's off and it needs to be tweaked. And the teams that realize that and look at themselves and adapt their SOPs, those are the ones that are truly successful and that really come out of here better, a lot better than what they came. Some come to that realization quicker than others. Some try to just hold on to it. This is my SOP. This is what I came up with. This is the perfect thing. I want to make it work. But when it meets the contact of the desert and the free thinking enemy, something just as simple as your battle rhythm. Is it should your battle rhythm just be a battle rhythm, or should your battle rhythm adapt to the rhythm of the battle?
Yeah.
And I can't take credit for that one. That is a quote from Lieutenant General Sean Bernabe, the 3 Corps commander. But I thought that was pretty profound.
Yeah, I remember hearing that.
Right. But it's the same thing. Are you willing to adapt? Those who are kind of like just married to their things grind through it, and they try to make it work instead of adapting to what the battle is telling you. Those that look and adjust their systems and processes and their SOPs, that's what we're really trying to get out here. And that's when we as OCs kind of feel really good of, because we'll give them those hints.
Yeah.
We'll help coach and train towards that. And those that take it and adapt to it, like that's where we really get a lot of reward out of this, is when you see the unit see themselves.
Oh yeah.
And adapt and get better.
Definitely. So that's the beauty of the National Training Center for all of Army Special Operations, but in this particular conversation, focus mainly on SF companies and detachments. They can work through those systems and processes and get tested by the environment, by the opposing force, and across all domains and dimensions that we have the ability. We do have water sometimes. It rains and there are lakes out here. I haven't seen a dive or a boat team actually use the water yet, but hey, you never know. But this is a training opportunity that every Special Forces soldier should be vying for. It's not something that we have the capacity to allow every detachment and AOB to get, just because there are only a set number of rotations and everybody's super busy. But when you have the chance, vie for this and come out here and really test your systems, test yourself, and learn from the experience. With that, sir, do you have any final comments?
Yeah, I feel remiss. I feel like I didn't mention our PSYOPs and CA brethren as much as I should have. So what I'll ask you to do, Weston, is when we put this out, put like the chapters out there that say like, hey, he's going to talk about CA and PSYOPs here. So if you if you want to skip over to that, you can skip down to it. But what I would say is, we talked about the information environment and how that all nests together. But what we try to do in the scenario is you need to employ and utilize all of those domains and all of those assets you have, especially CA and PSYOP, to really understand and visualize your operational environment as clear as possible. Mm-hmm. You have to integrate them into your force, into your AOB. They have to be valued members. They have to be in every meeting. They have to be critically listening to the AOB commander. And you have to be, as an AOB commander, critically listening to them. Because what we'll do in the scenario is, if you just take the intelligence that and the information that your ODAs are seeing and SOGITF is giving you, you'll have an extremely pixelated view of the battlefield. Because all the other corroborating information that you need to take that pixelated view to a clear view is coming through the information environment. It's coming through the human domain that the CA folks are working through. And they're picking up on it. So if you as the AOB commander aren't listening to what they're picking up, you're not going to put those dots together. You're not going to really truly understand your operational environment. Mm-hmm. Conversely, if the CA and PSYOP elements aren't involved in all of your battle rhythm events and critically listening, they're going to miss stuff as well. Because it might not be completely relevant to what CA is doing or what CA PSYOP is doing in their primary tasks. Mm-hmm. But it might be incredibly relevant and important to that ODA out there in the deep, or the actual lines of operations that you're trying to achieve. So it's really a holistic RSOF training environment that is mutually dependent on each other to achieve full success and really affect the operational environment. So I just want to put that out there because I feel it's really important into the context of what we do out here. It is just not for SF. Mm-hmm. It is for RSOF. It is an RSOF training center. We are an RSOF training team.
Yep. And we will say that we do have appreciation for the enablers for RSOF as well. And in the future episodes, we're going to take a deeper look at civil affairs and psychological operations at the National Training Center. If I can convince our 25 series and our MI guy, if they want to jump on and provide their context to this as well, we will incorporate enablers in the conversation as well. But to Major Hitzner's point, we do appreciate all the tribes of RSOF and all the enablers that come out and are part of our units and our organization. So thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you for listening to Off the Radar, where our SOF prepares for conflict.
You have been off the radar with Sandy West.